Praise the Lord, everybody. Pastor Nick here as we continue the journey through Psalm 23. So glad that you have joined us today. Please do us a favor and like, share, and subscribe. Get somebody onto the journey experience. Follow us all our platforms if you can. Follow the church, follow the bishop. Come on, make that connection as we continue the journey through Psalm 23. We're still in verse number 5, and it's amazing how God speaks to us through this particular chapter. Him preparing a table before us in the presence of our enemies. Him inviting us to his table. And the Bible says that he prepares this table. He lays it out. He sets it up before, in the presence of our enemies, in their face, in front of our enemies, visible for me to see, is visible for all to see. In the presence, he makes it known. He does it in front of our enemies. Now, enemies, when you look it up in the Hebrew, speaks of a narrow place, distress, hostile. So anybody that can bring distress, constant hostility, can be looked at as an enemy. And God prepares a table before them in those who bring hostility into our lives and bring distress into our lives. Reminded of a story of Hannah and Peninnah in 1 Samuel chapter 1, where Peninnah has children, Hannah has none. And every time they go into the house of the Lord to worship, Peninnah aggravates Hannah. Whenever they go up into worship, Peninnah begins to aggravate, begins to cause distress and hostility in the life of Hannah. You notice when you read it, it spells it out specifically. It's when they went into worship that she started on her. Don't think it's strange that as you're approaching God, that all of a sudden some hostility, the enemy starts to come your way so you can be so focused on the hostility and so focused on the pain and so focused on the distraction that you forget to worship God. It's the trick of the devil that as you're moving into a place of rest, a place of worship, a place of praise, that he will remind you of pain, remind you of suffering. You'll be so consumed by the suffering and the pain that you can't worship God properly. Because why? The enemy wants to bring distress. The Bible says that Hannah is so distressed one day while she's in the tabernacle that she comes in and she begins to pray, and Eli thinks she's drunk because she's talking, but she's mouthing, but nothing is coming out. She's pouring out her heart, the Bible says, but she looks like she's talking to herself, and Eli thinks she's drunk. And she says, I'm not drunk. I'm pouring out my soul. I'm pouring out my bitterness. There are times in your life when you have to learn to pour your bitterness out to God. Don't hold it in. Don't keep it in. Talk to God about it. Pour your bitterness out to him. Get it off your heart. He is a container that can handle your bitterness, handle your pain, and handle your frustration. She pours it out to God. And Eli says, when you go home, worship God. When you go home, you're going to get pregnant. You're going to have a baby. Then all of a sudden, this one who couldn't get pregnant has a baby called Samuel, has 5 other kids, and now Peninnah has to shut her mouth because the one who she was persecuting was the one that God blessed. You don't have to fight your enemies. Let God work it out and let him prepare a table. You don't have to worry about going off on them. Let God work it out and let him prepare the table before you and before your enemies. Let him work it out. And all of a sudden, Hannah has this prepared table in the presence of Peninnah. And Peninnah goes silent in that moment. And you don't see Hannah gloating, but you see Hannah praising God for what he did. You don't see Hannah going off on Peninnah and see, look at this. We just see Hannah worshiping God. When God does it, give more attention to him than your adversaries. Have more gratitude than you have anger towards those who persecuted you. The way of God and the way of Jesus is to celebrate him as he prepares his table. Celebrate him and not focus on your adversaries. Jesus says, love them, pray for them, which is not easy. But I want you to learn how to do it, because when you learn how to do it, you'll learn to get that bitterness and that resentment out of your heart. We study and we talk about our enemies through the lens of Jesus' teaching, because the Bible lets us know that if we do the right thing, he will not let your enemies rejoice over you. Learn to celebrate God, appreciate him, and don't fight your enemies. Let God prepare that table. Because a table that you build is a table you have to maintain. But if God prepares that table, nobody can stop what God's going to do in your life. Trust and believe that God's preparing this table. So glad you joined us today. We hope you enjoyed this lesson. Join us next time as we continue the journey through Psalm 23. God bless you.